Preparedness must be the greatest anthem in the entire world. May I ask the Reverend Asta Carlisle, Chief Pastor of the Webster Memorial Church, to start us off with prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal God, source and foundation of all things, seen and unseen, we approach you in the name of Jesus the Christ, giving you thanks for the benefits of life. You formed this world in love and sustain it by your Spirit of grace. You weave us into the tapestry of creation to steward and care for it. On this day when we mark the beginning of the hurricane season, we thank you for Jamaica. We praise you for all that make her special. Verdant landscapes, vibrant waters, creative people, resilient industries. We praise you for resourcing various individuals and institutions of our land with insight and expertise, helping us to preserve life and sustain environmental health. Bless their efforts, Lord. In our pursuits of development, help us to negotiate wisely, plan thoughtfully, build sensibly. Help us to nurture nature, that it may continue to nourish us. Spread your protective hand over us to keep us from disaster and wasting illness. Shine your light upon us that we may walk in your way. Speak your peace to us that we may work for peace. Soften our hearts that we may show love to each other. Hallow this gathering with your presence and our lives with your providence. And grant that through all our living and our giving, Jamaica may, under God, increase in beauty, fellowship, and prosperity, and play her part in advancing the welfare of the whole human race. For Christ's sake. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Carlisle. For those in the media center, you may be seated. Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, the Honorable Desmond McKenzie, the Minister of Local Government and Rural Development, ministers joining us on our Zoom platform virtually for the launch of the National Hurricane Season. Mr. Evan Thompson, the Director of the National Meteorological Service. Mr. Richard Thompson, the Director General Acting of ODPEM. Heads of agencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is June 1, as I said before, the start of the hurricane season, the official start. And interestingly, right here in Kingston, Jamaica, the office of the Prime Minister, overcast, cloudy, and I understand some showers outside at this time. What a period to start. So without further ado, because we have a very, very important day ahead of us too, let me present to you Mr. Richard Thompson, the Director General Acting of ODPEM, who will bring us a welcome note for the hurricane season, which is themed this year, Hurricane Readiness in Trying Times. Mr. Thompson.
Good afternoon, everyone. We would have extended the protocols earlier in our previous event, but good afternoon. Most Honorable Prime Minister, Minister McKenzie, other distinguished members, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Climate variability and climate change continue to impact small island developing states, such as Jamaica, causing major damage to coastal communities and the livelihood of its residents. Coupled with this are impact caused by new and emerging hazards and public health crises, and we all know too much about our global pandemic, COVID-19. With climate change, hurricane activities that were abnormal before are becoming the new normal. We not only have more hurricanes, but they are becoming more destructive when they make landfalls. COVID-19 has changed the way in which persons go about their daily lives. And for us in the disaster risk management arena, it has caused a major shift in how we prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters, whether these disasters are sudden onset, such as an earthquake, or slow-moving disasters, such as a hurricane. Disasters have the ability to disrupt population, change lives, and erode economic gains, thus retarding a country's development. Globally, many countries have seen this impact to their economies as a result of COVID-19, and Jamaica has not been spared as it relates to our impact. Now, to add to our COVID realities is a hurricane season that is projected to be an above normal one, and we would have seen one out-of-season hurricane thus far with Anna. These realities make our preparedness measures even more important. This year, our hurricane preparedness campaign will be observed under the theme Hurricane Readiness in Trying Times, a theme that gives our current reality a rather fitting end. To say we are in a dynamic or trying times in our history would be an understatement. There are fundamental social occurrences rapidly everywhere. Disasters are happening, and this is a reality in today's world. We at the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management have taken a multi-sectoral approach to shelter management in light of COVID-19. The capacity per shelters have reduced by 50% under the COVID-19 standard. Shelters' capacity in terms of square footage have increased from 20 square feet to 40 square feet per person to allow for physical distancing. In preparing for the 2021 hurricane season, ODPEM conducted a series of shelter management training across the island, where our shelter managers were re-engaged in shelter management material, which include our COVID-19 shelter guidelines. Training and capacity building took place in 2020, and we will continue to add on this with the additional community volunteers being trained and sensitized. The ODPEM website was revamped, which we are very proud of, and we are now seeing where our website, which is the www.odpem.org.jm, will have on this website the shelters across the island, so persons can find the shelters which are closest to them. Via our shelter management mapping program, we were able not only to pin each individual shelter, but persons can go on our website and see the shelters that are open. You just click on them and they change from red to green. I would like to take this opportunity to remind the public that in the event that you are going into a shelter, you have to take these things into consideration. Take with you water, medication, non-perishable food items, first aid kits, additional face masks, given that we're in COVID, and personal sanitization products such as your sanitizers and soap. In keeping with COVID-19 shelter protocol, it is important for our shelterees to know that they will be screened prior to entering the shelter. They should notify the shelter staff immediately if they are feeling any kind of illness or COVID-related symptoms. Persons who are exhibiting symptoms will be placed in an isolation areas, and every shelter came equipped with isolation areas in terms of our shelter assessment. The ODPEM manages a national emergency store, and our minister is very constantly talk to us about our emergency stores. Throughout this program, the ODPEM seeks to ensure a constant stream of emergency supplies, inclusive of relief items, emergency response supply items. These readily available response to emergencies and disasters such as flooding and earthquake. The general instances in which resources are distributed are in response to significant disaster events, operational support to emergency responders, and welfare assistance. The ODPEM, through the Humanitarian Assistance Committee of Council, chaired by the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, was able to provide assistance to affected communities across the island during our October to November rainfall events. As we enter what is projected to be an above-average hurricane season, this year hurricane season preparedness campaign will make a special focus as it relates to youth engagement, as youth involvement in disaster preparedness can effectively spread important messages about preparedness to their families, friends, and school communities. And with us today is Ms. Kyla Gaynor, which is for the first time our ODPEM Youth Ambassador. Youth can be the agent of change. We want to encourage our young people to participate in emergency preparedness activities, such as creating shelter kits and making a family preparedness plan, to name a few. Studies have shown that youth who have learned about emergency preparedness exhibit less anxieties during actual disaster emergency situation. The knowledge of what to do during an emergency empowers persons to act with confidence. Additionally, the ODPM will continue to play a role as the National Disaster Risk Management Coordinator by engaging our national stakeholders in a series of tabletop exercises, virtual evacuation drills, and other scenarios that will test our readiness for any eventualities. As the Acting Director General of the ODPM, I am confident in the ability of my team to execute the ODPM's mandate to foster hurricane readiness in these trying times. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for spending time and listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thompson, for your comprehensive update. Importantly, noting that every shelter in 2021, every shelter will have an isolation area. And in addition to that, that you can get more information from ODPEM's website, odpem.org.jm, that's .org.jm. And so Mr. Thompson spoke about youth involvement, a woman who has made history, being the first, ODPEM youth representative. Ms. Kayla Gaynor is here this afternoon. As a government, the Prime Minister has said that the young people must be involved. He's not only talked the talk, but he has walked the walk. We have young people integral in several areas in government. This afternoon, Kayla, as the ODPEM Youth Ambassador, will address us. Kayla, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. The Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Most Honorable Desmond Mackenzie, the Minister of Local Government and Rural Development, Dr. Nicole Dawkins-Wright, Ministry of Health and Wellness, Mr. Richard Thompson, Acting Director General, Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, Mr. Evan Thompson, Director Meteorological Service of Jamaica, the Reverend Asta Carlisle, our moderator, Ms. Naomi Francis, Press Secretary, Office of the Prime Minister. We acknowledge all our social media partners as well as viewers on all social media platforms. Good afternoon. Please drop a hurricane emoji in the chat whether you are joining us live or watching the replay. Before I proceed with my presentation on hurricane preparedness, let me share a true story. A student at the age of 9 years old had a track and field injury at school. This dislocated the distal femur in the right leg. It was a clean fracture which separated the long bone at the knee joint, rendering the child incapable of walking without support for 5 months. While undergoing recovery therapy, several trips to the hospital, and wearing a cast from hip to toe, this youngster was still attending school. One day, as fate would have it, there went the alarm for a disaster emergency drill. As the whole school rushed towards the assembly point, no one remembered the injured student who lagged behind on crutches. Then, the fiberglass cast the child was wearing broke and sliced the already injured leg. It was the children who eventually realized the emergency and gave support to their peer in a time of need. They were the heroes who wouldn't leave their friend behind. I am thankful that they didn't leave me behind. Today, at the age of 17 years and fully recovered, I am Kayla Gaynor, 2021 Youth Ambassador for the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM-YA. Join me as I continue to use this platform to engage the youth in as many communities as possible to continue helping others. Also to educate them in disaster risk and emergency management. My tagline, spreading awareness for the good of others. Today, June 1, is the start of the hurricane season. ODPEM continues to play a very pivotal role in leading our country through this season. They have now embarked on the Youth Ambassador Corps, a strong network of talented youth sharing and spreading awareness of ODPEM via the powerful tool that is the internet and volunteer service. Visit our webpage at odpem.org.jm for extensive information about hurricane preparedness and the annual digital poster competition. Stay with me. So, disaster risk management, what is that? Let's put that in media terms. How many times have we posted on social media without thinking about it first? It reaches so many people, creating a negative impact so quickly, you wish you could take it all back. Well, that is what you call a disaster. The risk was actually posting whatever came to your mind without thinking about it first. The damage it would cause and the people it would hurt. Put the phone down when someone needs your help. Don't take pictures of accidents and flooded houses without actually giving hands-on help. Use your hands and mind to do some real good. Rescue work, helping the elderly. Use your phone to call for help instead. Before you post, think carefully. Share positivity, inspiration, education. That is disaster risk management. In terms of hurricane season, disasters happen, be prepared. There are many preparation activities that you may already know, like collating emergency supplies, bottled water, canned food, flashlights, etc. Pause for a moment. Let me shed light on the not-so-obvious preparation techniques. At home, involve your children and teens in the emergency planning routine. Remember to now include masks and sanitizers in your emergency supplies in case you need to evacuate. We still need to follow COVID-19 guidelines and protocols during the hurricane season. Put all emergency contact numbers for the police, fire department, ambulance, shelters on your children's devices, not just the adults' phones. Teach your children how to apply first aid, not just to prepare the first aid kits. Young people are quick thinkers, problem solvers, innovators, and millennial multipotentialites. Once we are engaged and empowered with the knowledge of disaster risk management, many fatal eventualities, especially that of natural disasters, may be avoided. The media has many stories, especially during 2020, where children have saved their families from harm by their swift actions. Social media engages the young and young at heart. Since the start of my tenure as ODPEM Youth Ambassador, I have utilized my social media platforms to share tips, daily COVID-19 updates from ODPEM, the World Health Organization, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, the Minister of Health, JS, among others. Please join us on Instagram at KylaGaynor, Twitter and Facebook, hashtag KylaGaynor. On the ground, my schoolmates and I from the Queen's School joined the Jamaica Environment Trust, JET, the beach cleanup at Palisadoes, Jamaica, to eradicate waste from our shores. This did not go unnoticed and was endorsed by an international search map, Ikoru, on Twitter. We have received overwhelming response from youth in several parishes wishing to join this new movement. Hence the name Global Environment and Restoration Stars, GEARS, was coined, and we are now a proud member of JET. Most Honorable Prime Minister, please visit our pages as we ask for your endorsement and guidance in making our global environment and community work a success. We will continue to engage more youth right where they reside, go to school, and church, all while observing gathering limits, safety protocols, and guidelines issued by the government of Jamaica. On no movement days, we utilize social media for interactive sessions and brainstorming. In closing, I proudly use this platform to inspire my fellow youth. I see you, I hear you. Let us be strong for one another. A community that practices service to others and cares for their children, elderly, and their environment is a resilient one that can tackle any pandemic. Jamaicans at large, wear your masks, cover your mouth and nose with your elbow when you cough or sneeze. If you use a napkin, dispose of it immediately. Wash your hands with soap and water, sanitize. I thank you.
Whenever you hear the following tone, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM, will be giving information on an emergency situation affecting the island. Please be on the alert and listen to your radio and television for further information. This was a test of the emergency alert system, brought to you by ODPEM.
Thank you so much. A great reminder there in that ODPEM PSA. And Kayla, thank you so much. Kyla, thank you so much. Very, very brilliant. And of course, the voice of our young people being heard. And great reminders. Use your hands and minds to help, not just to take photos for social media during times of crises. Our next presenter is Mr. Evan Thompson. He's the director of the National Meteorological Service of Jamaica. On a day like today, the 1st of June 2021, the start of the national hurricane season, we have rain across Kingston, Jamaica. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you very much also for informing me that there is rain on the outside. A very good evening to all of you, Mr. Prime Minister Holness, Minister Mackenzie, PS Henry Martin, and other permanent secretaries on the platform, representatives from the cabinet who are also on the platform, members of the Disaster Management Council, Richard Thompson of the ODPEM, and of course, all our media who are here at the media conference, and all of the guests who are joined with us. I greet you all this afternoon. I am about to tell you about the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season. Today is June 1. I would like to say it's the moment we've all been waiting for, but unfortunately, it should be the moment we've all been preparing for, and I hope that we are all ready to face the next 6 months of our lives. Let me turn to my presentation, first of all, indicating projections for the 2021 hurricane season. The record-breaking year of 2020 is one that we will never forget, because this is a year that has shown us what a hurricane season can really do. We had a season, if you take a look, the projection is shown here. You see a map here that shows the network of tracks of tropical cyclones that developed during the course of 2021 and moved across the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean Sea, and the Gulf of Mexico. We, however, notice that Jamaica seems to have been spared, with all the tracks moving to the north, the south, the west, the east of the island, but none moving over us, which is a good sign, but of course not something that we can take complacency in. Right now, we looked at the 2020 season, which saw 30 named storms, 13 hurricanes, and of these 13 hurricanes, 6 of them became major hurricanes, some of them actually moving through the Western Caribbean. Pre-season storms were named. There were 2 systems that occurred before the beginning of June in 2020. These were Arthur and Bertha. And after the season ended on the 30th of November, gladly, there were no systems that developed over the waters. The first named storm was actually named on the 16th day of May. And then, of course, we had another one in May of that year. The first hurricane developed on the 23rd day of July, and our first major hurricane occurred on the 20th of August. Entering the Caribbean were 8 named storms. Of these storms, 3 of them became hurricanes entering the Caribbean area, and then we had 3 major hurricanes also in the Caribbean Sea. So this is something for us to take note of. Happily, there was no direct impact to Jamaica, although we did have indirect impact coming from a number of systems, starting with Laura in August, and then continuing with Zeta, Eta, and we also had Delta that occurred in the month of October. There are a number of factors that influence the activity of a hurricane season. And we see here that one of these is the ENSO-neutral conditions. ENSO refers to the El Niño Southern Oscillation, which is a scientific climatological phenomenon that really starts out with a warming or a cooling of the waters of the eastern tropical Pacific Ocean, but it develops and it also has an impact on our hurricane seasons from year to year. There was also the warmer than normal, or what we also look towards or to see is whether the sea surface temperatures of the Caribbean and the North Atlantic are normal in terms of the temperature, or if they are above or below normal. Warmer than normal conditions would mean an increase in tropical cyclone activity. Also, weaker trade winds over the tropical Atlantic would also signify the kind of shearing that would take place in the atmosphere that would encourage the further development of tropical cyclones. And then we also look to see what is happening in Western Africa, because in the central part of the hurricane season, that's when we normally see tropical waves beginning their movement from the western coast of Africa, moving across the tropical Atlantic and toward the Caribbean area. And so that's something that we look forward to. There is an enhanced monsoon over the Western Africa region this year, and so that should also contribute to the activity. The impacts of climate change are also things that we continue to watch for, because climate change predicts that we will have more intense hurricane activity, and that much of this will also mean significant storms and water in terms of the flooding that we should expect from these systems. But let us compare the seasons, not only what we are expecting in 2021, but what we have experienced in 2020 and what we consider to be a normal season. A normal season now sees 14 named storms, 7 of them becoming hurricanes and 3 of them becoming major hurricanes. In 2020, as I mentioned before, we had much more than the norm, in that we had 30 storms, 13 hurricanes, and 6 of them becoming major hurricanes. For the 2021 season, we could have anywhere between our best case scenario and our worst case scenario. In the best case, we are expecting to see at least 13. We expect to see about 13 tropical storms, of these 6 becoming hurricanes and 3 of them being major hurricanes. But the worst case, what we are seeing now, which of course could be adjusted as we move to the center or the middle of the hurricane season, this worst case is saying we could actually have 20 tropical storms. We could have 10 of these becoming hurricanes, and of these 10, 5 of these could be major hurricanes. If you take a look at that bar chart to the right and then look to the left where the normal season is, we can see that what we are expecting is a season that is significantly more active than a normal season. So these are no longer normal times. Jamaica's vulnerability, based on the climatology for tropical cyclone development and motion, Jamaica in the northwestern Caribbean Sea remains vulnerable to activity from tropical cyclones in 6 months of the hurricane season. The hurricane season is for 6 months, which means that throughout every month, there is a level of vulnerability that Jamaica has, being in the northwestern Caribbean. In June, the systems are likely to develop in the Western Caribbean or in the Gulf of Mexico. So Jamaica is in that general area. In July, we're likely to see more of the development in the central and eastern part of the Caribbean, also in the Gulf of Mexico and along the eastern seaboard of the United States. All of these also push Jamaica or leave Jamaica within the path of some of the movement of these systems. As we move through August and September, we are likely to see more of the development over the tropical Atlantic, but the general trend of movement takes them into the Caribbean through areas that could also impact Jamaica, into the Gulf of Mexico or over to the extreme northwestern Atlantic. Then as we go into October, again, the development starts to occur more in the west once again, the Western Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico, movement expected toward the north, which we have seen in recent years as well. And so Jamaica is also in a very vulnerable position. As we move to November, the systems also develop in the Western Caribbean. We have seen some of that in recent years as well, and the movement is usually toward the north, putting Jamaica once again in the path of the movement of these cyclones. So we always remain vulnerable throughout the 6 months of the hurricane season. In conclusion, conditions in the Caribbean Sea and surrounding areas should remain conducive to tropical cyclone development in 2021. Secondly, The 2021 Atlantic hurricane season is predicted to be more active than normal. Third, active seasons do not guarantee direct impact to Jamaica or any other specific territory, but one direct hit in a year of low activity could be devastating. Also, Jamaica's last direct hit occurred in 2012. The island remains vulnerable, however, to tropical cyclone strikes, so preparation is essential. That is the last message I need to leave with you. Preparation for the hurricane season is always essential because we remain vulnerable for all 6 months. Those were our projections. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thompson, for those words, projecting what will be a very active hurricane season, but also very important that we prepare. So if we haven't started yet, which nationally, of course, we have, the Prime Minister just concluded the meeting of the National Disaster Risk Management Council. And when he speaks, he certainly will update the nation. But if you, in your own homes, have not yet begun to prepare, please do. It's not a crying call to be alarmed, but to be prepared. And now let's turn our attention to the Ministry of Health in terms of their own preparedness for the hurricane season, and in particular to look at COVID-19 protocols during this time. May I invite Dr. Nicole Dawkins-Wright, Director in the Ministry, for her presentation.
Most Honorable Prime Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, members of the press, members in the public. I am here to highlight some of the COVID-19 protocols for the hurricane season, but I think my job is already done by our youth ambassador, who has actually expounded on the COVID-19 protocols, but I've learned that repetition is good. And so I will go through again for emphasis, because it always serves good to reinforce what we need to do and to highlight the areas that we need to concentrate as we go into the hurricane season, being launched under the theme Hurricane Readiness in Trying Times. So the slides, which will be projected, is going to highlight some of the areas that I want to just bring to the fore with some critical information where I provide a little bit of a context, go into the COVID-19 situation, update that will help us to understand what we need to do in terms of being ready for this season, bearing in mind the COVID-19 considerations, some general health considerations, what we need to do to factor in terms of our preparedness, which has already been elucidated in terms of what we need to do for COVID-19, and just give an update in terms of the state of readiness of the health sector so we can best prepare should we need to respond if a hurricane or thunderstorm makes landfall in Jamaica. Slide. So in terms of the planning for the hurricane season and other potential causes, potential disasters can be stressful. I think we already know that, and especially so in this year because of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, and has been stated and highlighted before, this is now the second time that we're preparing for the season, whilst we also mobilize and have been responding to COVID-19. The stress cannot be understated, and many of us are feeling that pressure, and we need to consider that when we need to make take our measures and put our families, our personal selves, our families, our organization ready for the season. It is dynamic, it is ever-changing, and that in and of itself carries with it the additional stressors that makes it even more challenging. But Jamaicans are not afraid to take on challenge. And was said before, we started off with prayer, God is good. We will not be fearful. We combat fear by understanding what we need to do. And so because we have been responded to the COVID-19 with a whole of government approach, we know everybody is tired, but guess what? It makes us stronger. The season presents additional challenges, and so we have additional protection, which is what I'm going to highlight with the slides. I must, however, underscore what came out in our Youth Ambassador's presentation, and is the need for personal preparedness. There's so much that we can do, but most importantly, it starts with ourselves, individually preparing what we need to do, understanding what I've been doing for years. The ADPEM and all the other sectors for disaster preparedness have been highlighting over time what we need to do for hurricane season. It's not novel. It's not novel. Bring it back to the fore and just remember that preparation is what we need to do, and more importantly, so just remind ourselves of what we need to do. And now focus on what we need to take into consideration for COVID-19. The fundamental concepts remain unchanged. Spacing, physical distancing, mask etiquette, and sanitization. It goes hand in hand in everything. But again, how do we apply it in our personal circumstance, in our spaces? We must incorporate the learned best practices that we would have had from last year. We went into a season last year with the ongoing pandemic. We would have done some things. We would have learned some things. Don't forget what you have learned. You best know how to respond in your own personal space. Whilst we can provide some general information, you adapt what we provide to your personal space. So let's look at the COVID-19 situation update and get an understanding as to why we need to highlight some health consideration. So on the slide, you will see in terms of the numbers. You know this graph. We talk about it very regularly. You know what it looks like and what the graph represents. It's the numbers. It's the numbers of COVID-19 cases. And you'll recognize that we have gone through a second wave, and we would have highlighted before what a third wave may look like if we keep the numbers before. A third wave is likely to put us in problems. But you can prevent that third wave. You can prevent that third wave. That is what our youth ambassador highlighted earlier. That is what has been said before. That's what we say every day. Personal responsibility, personal preparedness. We cannot go into a third wave. But we have been preparing, right? If we look in the next slide and try and anticipate what may happen, if we should have an adverse weather event, recognize that any one of those consequences of adverse weather events could be the trigger for that third wave. Because we need to respond, sometimes the fear and the anxiety can in fact cause us to do things and forget what those protocols are. I'm asking you and I'm charging you to remember what they are at all times. Exercise them every day so it becomes routine and normal. When you're nervous, sometimes what you fall back on is what you practice every day. So practice the COVID-19 protocols every day. If we need to respond, it will be well ironed out by the time it comes around. Look at the numbers. The tail of the curve is higher than where we were before the second wave. Let's prevent that from overtaking us. If we were to look on our next slide in terms of what we have, however, I just want to assure you, however, that in spite of that outlook, we have taken measures in the health sector to ensure that should we need to respond to an adverse weather event, we are better able to because of what we've gone through over the last year and change. The Emergency Operations Center is significantly upgraded so that we can coordinate what we need to do and move our very limited resources and target it into areas that need intervention. We understand the importance of our health facilities, and so we have taken measures to ensure that if something should happen, we are better able to withstand adverse weather events. Our communication is key. We need to know and understand and listen. So we know the traditional ways, but our youth ambassador highlighted the social media, follow through, listen to the information. We present information as well from the Ministry of Health and Wellness to provide some guidance and reminders. Listen to the alerts that come from the ADPEM and the Meteorological Office in terms of what we need for. And again, heed the warnings. As you would have recognized, in recent times, we would have had to prepare for surge mechanisms because the cases can go up. So guess what? We have taken measures to be able to respond should we need to expand if it should happen, and make sure that our surge mechanisms have been well exercised and able to accommodate an increase in our loads. Our transportation capacity has not increased since further from last year, but we have made sure that we have built networks and linkages with our partners in health, in the public sector and in the private sector, that should we need to do large-scale movements, we are in a better position to do so, and we know who to speak with because we've built that relationship. Highlighted earlier was the shelter-management guidelines that have been updated to reflect the updated requirements for COVID-19. We are going through and we're working with the team members, the parish disaster officers, the shelter managers in terms of the additional requirements. But understand, again, that the capacity may not be as much as it was before, and therefore ensure that you have an alternative, your own personal shelter arrangements, that you may be called upon to utilize. Restore those relationships, restore the family relationships, understand that we may need to mobilize and what you need to do. The special needs community has been highlighted before. Our youth ambassador highlighted our own personal circumstance, but this is a reality routinely and normally in some families. If you know that this is so, factor this in your preparation. You will need more time to prepare. It's not the same as before, and because the additional requirements of COVID-19 require the additional measures to be taken, put and budget more time for preparation activity once you get word foreseen. So here are some COVID-19 considerations. Next slide. The season has started. If you have not already been conditioning yourself for the season, we can still go ahead. There is something called health conditioning that we can do to make us better able to withstand the effects of adverse weather events. We have talked about vaccination, and of course, I'm emphasizing again the stress and the mental health requirements. The psychological support and emotional well-being is critical to a successful response should we need to do so. Know what your support system is. And if you don't have, the Ministry of Health and Wellness has expanded its support mechanism to be able to provide that support. Visit our website to get the access points for these areas. I emphasize again that it will need more time to prepare, budget more time for preparation, listen to the warnings and plan for more time to lead up ahead. We would have spoken about our shelter should you need to evacuate, but again, remember that if you need to do so, remember your medicines that will need to go with your critical supplies, etc. There are additional access points and expanding access points to be able to acquire additional medication in keeping with COVID-19 requirements, so you are better able to do so. Maintain all of this throughout and use your digital resources additionally. The next slide, in terms of evacuation preparation, we talk about our go kits, and again, living in close quarters. So just to emphasize in terms of what we've been doing both for you and for the health sector, we have taken measures to ensure that we are ready should we need to respond, should there be a landfall from adverse weather events. I thank you very much, and I will end right there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nicole Dawkins-Wright, patiently taking us through really the important elements we must bear in mind once we are in this hurricane season, and certainly points to prepare for. Thank you so much, Doc. We really appreciate it. And no doubt there will be smaller group meetings where we re-emphasize this for members of the public and put out information for members of the public. Importantly, we have now our Minister of Local Government and Rural Development, the Honourable Desmond McKenzie, to speak with us. I just wanted to point out, too, that especially in an era of disaster preparedness and in the hurricane season, it's important that you get information from official sources. At this time, there are so many people who have information spreading around that may not be from the official source. Always go to the official sources. Minister McKenzie is one such source. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you, Naomi. Most Honourable Prime Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen present here and those who are joining us by virtue of technology. My presentation is very, very brief because I want to allow the Most Honourable Prime Minister enough time to speak to the nation, but to advise the country that the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management are working closely with the municipal corporations and the various stakeholders, that we are in a state of readiness. We are almost 100% ready in terms of our shelters. There are 867 shelters island-wide, and we have done assessment on almost 90% of shelters across the island. The question has been raised about isolations in regards to COVID-19. All our shelters are equipped with isolation areas so that persons, if they come down with COVID, will be relocated to these shelters. Training for disaster coordinators and various stakeholders are well advanced. On Friday, We'll be spending all day meeting with the disaster coordinators, the various stakeholders in an all-day meeting to continue the preparations as we get into the hurricane season. A word of advice and notice, we want to also emphasize that we are not just talking about the hurricane season. We are still faced with earthquake, and the discussion that we've been having with the ODPEM and the Ministry of Health surrounds the heat conditions that we are expecting to have some severe impact on the country during the summer. The Prime Minister has given the mandate for us to commence a comprehensive mitigation program right across the island, with the local authorities working closely with the National Works Agency to ensure that we do as much mitigation work as possible before we get deep into the hurricane season. But I want to use this opportunity to beg of the country to work with us to ensure that if there is any event, that the effects are very minimal, because the actions of the Jamaican people, we continue to build in areas that are not designated for construction. And what that means is that when rain comes and there's a flooding, everything is lost and the consequences are great in other areas. We are making preparations in terms of relief supplies. The ODPEM is in a position to provide relief supplies. And last thing I want to say, we'll be concentrating our efforts on a very comprehensive public relations program by having virtual town hall meetings across the country. And earlier on, you was introduced to the Youth Ambassador, which will be a major feature of our educational program during this hurricane season. Jamaica will be hosting the 9th Regional Platform on Disaster Risk Reduction in November. It will be a virtual meeting, and we have agreed that the message that we want to send to that international conference is Jamaica continue to be the leading country in the region when it comes on to disaster response and preparedness. I am confident and pleased in the work of the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, and I want to commend the team for the excellent job that they have been doing and will continue to do. We cherish the relationship with the Ministry of Health. We cherish the relationship with the Office of the Prime Minister, with the various entities. And I want again to say to the country that our Jamaica Fire Brigade and all our first responders is in a state of readiness. But we can only be ready in so much as the Jamaican people allow us to be ready. I crave your indulgence, and before I leave, I'd like to present to the Most Honorable Prime Minister a copy of the State of Readiness report prepared by the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, ODPEM. Prime Minister. So you can say that the Minister gave you a copy of the State of Readiness of the ODPEM Prime Minister. So this is the document outlining the program that will take us through the hurricane season and beyond. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. Really appreciated your comprehensive report concerning the readiness of our disaster risk management agencies. And so now, Minister Mackenzie spoke about Jamaica being the leading country for disaster response, a man who is responsible in leading the country, who has to have not just a myopic view, but a wide strategic view of all angles in this country to ensure that all Jamaicans are especially taken care of during this time and all times. The Most Honourable Andrew Holness, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, now to address us and give us a charge for the 2021 hurricane season under the theme, Hurricane Readiness in Trying Times. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Naomi. Good afternoon, everyone. It is timely and instrumental that following our National Disaster Risk Management Council meeting, we are here now to launch the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management National Hurricane Preparedness Campaign for the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season, which starts today, June 1. The campaign is guided by the theme, Hurricane Readiness in Trying Times, and are we in trying times now? With a special focus on community and youth involvement in disaster risk management to increase preparedness levels. This is our second hurricane season in the midst of a pandemic. Indeed, these, as I said before, are trying times. The restrictions imposed by COVID-19 will alter our emergency and recovery responses. However, we are not daunted. We are focused on strategically putting in place what we need to safeguard our faster and stronger recovery. On May 20, 2021, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, says in its annual hurricane season outlook, the agency is predicting that 2021, the Atlantic hurricane season, will be busier than average. However, the forecasters do not anticipate the historic level of storm activity seen in the previous season, which had 30 named storms and was only the second time in the history of named storms that the names were exhausted. The objectives of the National Hurricane Preparedness Campaign are to increase public awareness of all hazards, increase visibility island-wide, create a culture of compliance, strengthen public knowledge to cause behavior change in how we plan and prepare for disasters, increase youth involvement in community outreach projects and programs. The ODPEM, of course, plays the lead role in the achievement of these objectives as the National Disaster Coordinating Agency. ODPEM, in collaboration with national, regional, and international agencies, is committed to taking proactive and timely measures to prevent or reduce the impact of hazards on Jamaica, its people, our natural resources, and our economy. I have, in my capacity as chairman of the National Disaster Committee, instructed the committee to direct its attention to a number of priority areas. First, readiness of shelters and shelter operations. And you would have heard from ODPEM and other presenters that we are ready. The cleaning of the country's priority drain infrastructure is another area of critical focus, and I am aware that the NWA has already started its mitigation mobilization. And then the enhanced public education and awareness initiative, of which this event is one example. Public education is an integral part of our approach to increase public awareness and engagement to support the disaster preparation and emergency management activities of the ODPEM. The Jamaican people will gain greater understanding of disaster risk management to be able to prepare for disasters, emergency situations, and emerging hazards. allowing them to properly and intentionally, actively protect and safeguard themselves, family, and property, thereby ensuring hurricane readiness in trying times. During the past year, we successfully managed the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the impact of flood rains from tropical storms Zeta and Eta. The concurrent health and weather events put our emergency systems and response readiness to the test. The government applauds our frontline workers and emergency management personnel for their hard work during this most challenging circumstance. Like we have done successfully in the past year, our strategy must be to anticipate, plan, and prepare for the threat, not to panic if or when it materializes. Let's remember the tagline: disasters happen, be prepared. With all the storms that are being projected, as this will be a very active season, and with all the challenges that we have as it relates to managing the pandemic and managing other threats that we face, the government of Jamaica has a well-established disaster risk management and response mechanism. Every year, the government mobilizes all its agencies and departments into a broad stakeholder body, into the National Disaster Risk Management Council, which also includes the opposition. It includes members of the private sector, the JDF, the JCF, the Fire Brigade, all responses, the Ministry of Health, and you would have heard a significant presentation by the Ministry of Health. Last year was challenging when we had to be managing the pandemic and managing the hurricane season. Thankfully, we were not directly hit, but we were still significantly hit with the two hurricanes. And it indeed challenged our fiscal resources. But we stood up and we provided relief and we were able to respond. I listened carefully to the presentation by Mr. Thompson. And in that presentation, he didn't say it directly, and I don't intend to say it directly either. But he displayed a chart, and I doubt the chart is being displayed now, which effectively pointed out that Jamaica has been blessed. Some people will say lucky. That all the storms that have come have skirted us, gone around us. I recall in 2017, with Hurricane Matthew, 16, heading directly, and then it just changed course. We would pray to our God that His mighty hand will guard us again in 2021 to prevent any such disaster from happening to us. But should it happen, we are prepared. I want to thank all the heads of agencies, the heads of the various departments, and our stakeholders for participating in this exercise, and to appeal to you, the members of the public. Disasters will happen. You should get prepared. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for your words of encouragement and, of course, to remind us once again, be prepared. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for the launch of the National Hurricane Preparedness Season, along with, of course, following the council meeting of the National Disaster Risk Management Council. The Prime Minister does have a very, very hectic day. Prime Minister and Minister Mackenzie head off to Parliament And of course, there will be presentations in Parliament as well this afternoon. So may I then thank everyone gathered here at the Office of the Prime Minister in the Media Centre and those online for joining us this afternoon. And we wish you a very good day.